This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. She's got money, organization, tenacity, and discipline on her side. And Bill Clinton. So what will Hillary Clinton do in 2016? Regular contributor and blogger Catherine Poe says this is her moment. MIT economist Simon Johnson tells us the economy is improving, but irresponsible austerity will create a catastrophe here and around the world. And Bill Press talks with Congressman Henry Cuellar, who says Democrats want immigration reform, but Republicans need it. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Hillary Clinton is no longer a political lightning rod, says regular commentator Catherine Poe. She is now a statesman, and now is her moment to run for president. And joining us now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats, Catherine Poe writes the ad-lib blog for the Washington Times Communities. She is a former president of Long Island National Organization for Women, and she was selected by Progressive Maryland as one of the top progressives in the state, along with Senator Barbara Mikulski and Congresswoman Donna Edwards. Catherine Poe, always a pleasure to have you back here on americasdemocrats.org.
I'm happy to be here.
So, Hillary Clinton is one of the most popular public figures in America and the world. Do you think that makes it inevitable that she will run for president in 2016?
Well, nothing is inevitable, right? But I do think she'll run unless there is a health concern. Now, she has been interviewed and said, you know, despite what happened to her, and it's the second time she has fainted due to some kind of a virus, that she thinks her health is good. So assuming that her health holds and she has time to recover from being Secretary of State, I think there's a lot of reasons that she's going to be running again. Running again, because she did run in 2008. Most people maybe don't realize, but she's never closed her campaign chest from that campaign. And she's paid off her debt. By the way, she just paid it off in December. That's how long it took her to pay it off. But she has $205,000 in there, and she has not closed it, which means that people can start donating right now. So it is still open. She is right now, of course that doesn't mean 4 years from now, but right now she's more popular than President Obama or Michelle Obama. And Joe Biden, not even in the ballpark. I mean, he's much lower than she is by about 20 points.
I tell you, the one that I find astounding is the fact that she's more popular than Michelle Obama.
Yes, not by a lot. It was like 1 point.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a lot. It was just one. Yeah. But she, at this point, she is. Yeah. And she ran. You know, one of the things is she knows how to run a huge organization because she ran the State Department, which is everybody from custodians to ambassadors, and it's about 50,000 people. So, I mean, while she's not doing the day-to-day hands-on, but she's still in charge. And I think one of the things we did see with her testimony before those nasty senators, or I should say nasty Republican senators, is that she said the buck stops here, which, as Harry Truman said, that's what presidents have to say. The buck stops here. She took full responsibility, and of course, she was fearless. She stood right up to these people. And you got to be fearless if you're going to run for president, and you have to have a thick skin. And I think that's something she has developed over the years. And of course, she has Bill Clinton in her corner, which that's the secret weapon. What we saw him do for Obama, that's nothing compared to what he will be able to do for her in 2016. I mean, I just think if he's really let loose full force, what he could do for her.
Yeah.
And also all the polls show she's energized the Democratic Party. And it would give them the opportunity to have a 1-2 punch, first black president and then the first woman president. And I think that's something that's very important. And, of course, the women are out there for her, including Republican women. It's very interesting. And when they do the surveys, it's everybody from centrist Democrats to progressives to independents. to African Americans, of course, minorities, and of course the Democratic base, and almost everybody else in between. So it doesn't leave a lot of room for almost anybody else to be running. So this is why I think, yeah, no, definitely she's going. And I should add one thing: she has the essentials to run. Grit. She's tenacious and she's disciplined, and those are really essentials if you're going to be running. And she's got those three in spades.
I was going to ask you what some of her strengths are in her campaign, but I think in that last answer, you pretty much covered all of her strengths. I mean, she's got really everything going for her for a run for president in 2016 if she chooses to do so.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. And she's interesting. She's no longer quite the political lightning rod she was. Now she's become a statesman or stateswoman, which then puts her into another category, of course. And she's learned a lot, in her years. First it's her Senate run, and then this even last time. And I think one of the things that she does well is she listens and learns. And probably a great strength was probably exhibited best in New York. She was losing upstate New York State when she was running, and she went up there. And believe it or not, it was like dairy farmers she reached out to, and I mean they're basically conservative and Republican. And she sat down and she listened, and she carried upstate New York, because one of the things she learned is what you got to do, and you have to reach out and you go in there and you don't talk to people, talk to them, like down to them. You sit down and you listen to them. And what are their concerns? And she began to address those. So this is the kind of thing, I think this is why she's going to be very formidable, because that's a tremendous strength. And just the last one I should add is, of course, her international experience as well as her, domestic side. She knows both. So, all of this goes together. She's a pretty strong package for the Democrats to run.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Catherine Poe, who writes the Ad Lib blog for the Washington Times Communities. Now, of course, Catherine, running for president is exhausting, obviously, and it opens an almost sainted person to political and personal attacks. Now she's had this before, because when she ran for president before, she's run for Senate. But isn't it possible that she may forego a campaign and contribute to public policy in other ways?
That's a possibility, yes.
And where would you see her contributing in your opinion?
Well, I think if she was the head of a foundation or a think tank, I think that's definitely less taxing, and it sort of continues that stateswoman, image that she would continue to project. I don't think it's challenging. Also, I think there's a sense of history that she has. This is her moment, and that's one of the things they tell politicians: know your moment. And this is her moment now. I think she would have a clear field. I think she can handle the personal attacks. If what we saw her before that committee, when they let loose the dogs of war on her, she had no trouble handling those guys. She defanged them. And if Hagel, he should have been watching clips of that. If he had watched that, he would learn how do you deal with these kind of personal attacks, and what do you do, and how do you turn this against them when they're doing this? Because she was vulnerable on questioning on Benghazi, but they did it wrong, and she handled them, beautifully. So she knows how to handle nasties, and it'll be a very nasty campaign. But she's been tested. Politics is a crucible, and she's been in that crucible before. And what else are they going to throw at her? There's Bill and Monica. There's Whitewater. There is the Foster murder, in quotes.
Right.
It's a suicide. She's done things like get the Arabs to sit down and form a coalition with us, something nobody else had been able to do. And, of course, she ran against Barack Obama. And so I would say she has been in the crucible, and I think she can withstand it. While it might be tempting to be in that think tank and head it up, I think there's that pull. Even though I know she will be almost 70 at the time that she's running, but I think 70 today is not the 70 of our grandmothers. So it's a different age. It's a much younger age.
Well, a couple of months ago, before her most recent fainting spell and then the concussion that came with it, she looked, and as tired as she looked, I was going to say, and just ready to be done with it all, she still didn't look as her age. She still looks younger than what people think she is. So that's certainly in her favor.
You can already see her. Don't you think she looks a lot better now than she did even a few months ago? And this is with her recovering from this. So it just shows that she bounces back pretty well. She's already starting to look better.
Absolutely.
So I think, she needs this year off completely. Obviously, this is not the year to campaign. This is the year to take off. And the next year, she raises money. And then the next 2 years, those are the years you run. So she just needs to, take this year off and recover.
Well, let's look at this. Because she is so accomplished, popular, well-funded, does that mean other Democrats, and specifically the vice president, Joe Biden, should they simply stand aside and cede the 2016 nomination to her?
No. And they probably won't at first, but I think once she starts to move, I think they will. I mean, I think that basically they'll fall aside, like people like Martin O'Malley, quite young, Andrew Cuomo, very young still. So they don't have to run in 2016. Biden has to run in 2016 if he's going to ever be the president. But I have an idea that Biden would not challenge her. I think he felt that he would, that he would give it to her and, basically just step aside rather than make, cause dissension in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now let's look at it. She decides not to run. Who do you see as the most viable Democratic candidate? So Biden obviously would be up there, I guess, but is he automatically the front runner? Or does it depend on how well the the Obama administration does?
I do think he's a front runner, and it probably would depend somewhat on how the Obama administration does. But, Biden is such an old hand in Washington. He'd be sort of like Johnson. He knows how to schmooze. He knows how to get legislation passed. I mean, he's the one that talked to McConnell on the preventing, the meltdown here at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And he knows the inner workings now of the office of president. He even knows that quite well. Plus, he's actually been given a place on the world stage. And probably the most important, he's hungry. He really wants this. And I think he would be an amazing candidate. Now, the names that are floated out there besides are Andrew Cuomo of New York, governor of New York, governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley, Mark Warner, senator from Virginia, and he could be almost a Bill Clinton-esque kind of character, when it comes out of the South and has many of those values, and that he would be a very strong candidate. Now, I do hear talk about these three, and I don't think they have any chance, and that's Deval Patrick, governor of Massachusetts, the new senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, and Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. I really don't. Well, the first two are from a too liberal state, Massachusetts, so I just don't think there's any hope there. Napolitano, I don't think is a household name enough that she. I think it would take a lot of time to get name recognition. And the last name, I have only heard this a couple of times. I don't know if, I doubt that she's the one that's been floating it, but Michelle Obama, believe it or not. But I don't think she's come around to love politics that much that she would run.
I would be shocked if she chose to dive into that pool. Before we let you go, and back to Hillary Clinton. What about the Supreme? Yeah. What about the Supreme Court? Would Hillary Clinton be an ideal appointment for the president or any Democratic president to make?
I think so. I absolutely do. I think she would be very, very good, and she'd be an ideal foil for Scalia and Roberts. I don't think they would find her as easy as the two recent women that have been appointed. I think they would find her, and yet she does know how to work with people, but she really does also know how to stand up for what she believes in. But, and I go, always but, she's been out of law a long time. She's not, been Judge Clinton. So, and her real passion always seems to be in politics. And you know what? I suspect she may have an agenda that she wants to fulfill, which is why she would run for president. I think she wants to sort of finish the work of what Clinton, because of his nonsense, never got accomplished, and what Obama probably will not be able to get accomplished at this rate. if we continue like he did the last 4 years, and the Republicans in Congress. And also, I think she's got the international agenda of still promoting the rights of girls and women around the world to not only improve their lives, but the economics of their countries, and, of course, ultimately stabilize those countries and help spread democracy. That has been such a focal point of her as Secretary of State. And as President of the United States, she would be able to maybe make a big dent in that agenda. So, I think she would be a wonderful Supreme Court justice. I have an idea that unless her health is going to be that this too taxing for her to run, then I would think she would not be interested.
Okay, so we're leaning on her running for president, then, I would assume.
Yeah, I think she is, unless there is something, with her health. I think that's the only impediment.
Okay, well, she doesn't have a whole lot of time to figure it out because they're going to start campaigning for 2016 pretty darn soon.
Oh, yeah.
Catherine Poe.
Oh, yeah, right. No, because
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's inevitable, right? I mean, they're already starting to campaign for the midterms, so... Catherine Poe writes the ad-lib. Yeah, Catherine Poe writes the ad-lib blog for the Washington Times Communities, joins us regularly here on americasdemocrats.org. And Catherine, as always, we appreciate your time with us today and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Oh, it's been fun, Jim.
Thanks. We'll talk to you soon. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Professor Simon Johnson of MIT says while we have to solve our fiscal problems, there's no need for precipitous, irresponsible austerity, as proposed by Republicans. That's coming up in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Since being thumped hard by voters last November, Republican leaders have gone through a period of reflection, introspection, and contemplation. And they now say they must make fundamental internal changes to become realistic political contenders. Does this mean they're finally going to quit being a political front for the Koch brothers' plutocratic fantasies, jettison their Tea Party nuttiness about everything from nullification to legitimate rape, or stop their destructive fixation on budget slashing? No, it's not their own deeply flawed fundamentals they intend to change, but the inner workings of America's election mechanics. The problem, they say, is not their unpopular policies or their offensive strategy of attacking whole swaths of the electorate, but that states are not allocating their electoral votes in ways that would throw the election to Republicans. For some time, we've seen GOP governors and election officials openly rigging rules and voting procedures to shut out students, minorities, seniors, and other likely Democratic voters from casting ballots. But now, top Republicans are going all out to fix vote allocation rules in selected swing states, enabling their presidential candidates to, quote, win even though they lose. For example, last fall, Obama won Florida, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Wisconsin. But with Republicans in control of those state governments, the GOP is scheming to award the electoral votes of those states in the future not to the statewide winner, but to the winner in each congressional district. If it had been fully implemented for last year's election, this arbitrary slicing and dicing would have diverted enough electoral votes to Romney to hand him the presidency. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more on the GOP's plot to steal the White House, see a full report at AmericanProgressAction.org. That's AmericanProgressAction.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Economist Simon Johnson warns that irresponsible austerity methods proposed by Republicans could throw the world into a financial catastrophe. And, he says, it would be the private sector that really suffers. And joining us now, Simon Johnson, former chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, is the Ronald A. Kurtz Professor of Entrepreneurship at the MIT Sloan School of Management and co-author of White House Burning, The Founding Fathers, Our National Debt, and Why It Matters to You. Simon Johnson, thanks for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
My pleasure.
Now that the economy seems to have stabilized somewhat, many economists and politicians see that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. Do you?
Well, certainly there's an economic recovery underway. It's slower than we would like it to be. The jobs have still not come back to anywhere near where they were in 2007 before the crisis began. But yes, the economy is improving.
All right, so the fiscal cliff negotiations, did they simply put off another day of reckoning that could threaten the stability of the American economy?
Well, there was some progress made at that point. Tax rates did go up on higher income people. That's what needed to happen. I think further adjustment in the revenue base is needed, and that's still on the table in Washington. We need to address our fiscal problems, but we mustn't panic about them. There's no need for precipitate, irresponsible austerity at this point.
Well, it seems that all of a sudden, so they do the temporary deal to keep us from falling off the cliff. And now it seems there are a lot of folks in Congress that are very complacent and almost seemingly willing to just let it happen, let sequestration happen. That can't be the right way to go, can it?
No, it's a very bad way to go. But I think you're right. I think the House Republicans have dug in pretty hard. They also don't want to make their own proposals for what to cut, because any proposal you make is going to be unpopular, because much of government spending is actually pretty sensible and well done. So I think that we're going to have the sequester. It's a bigger question whether we're going to have a government shutdown, because that decision comes shortly afterwards. And then, of course, the debt ceiling comes back as a decision that has to be made by May. So there's a series of fiscal confrontations coming our way from Washington.
Now, we're speaking with Simon Johnson. He is the co-author of White House Burning, The Founding Fathers, Our National Debt, and Why It Matters to You. You mentioned the debt crisis, Simon. Is it really a debt ceiling crisis? And if so, how seriously would a U.S. default affect the global economy?
Oh, yeah, U.S. default would be a catastrophe. And anyone who even mentions the possibility is being irresponsible and playing with fire. The good news is that the Republicans backed down on that front in January, and hopefully they'll take it off the table going forward, because that was just the height of irresponsibility.
They took it off the table, but we've made these little temporary deals, and we keep, as what's been popular to say, is kicking the can down the road. What has to happen? I mean, do the Republicans really have a leg to stand on? I mean, there is the 14th Amendment. We're not really allowed to default. So I don't understand why there's an argument here from the Republicans.
Well, you're getting into some very interesting and tricky constitutional questions. I tend to agree with you. I think if it came down to it and the matter was referred to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court would support the ability of the Treasury to pay out on existing debt and, in fact, existing obligations previously incurred. But that will be a huge degree of uncertainty, and just imagine the world markets waiting with bated breath for that decision to be handed down from the Supreme Court. You don't want to go there. You don't want to go anywhere near there. The risk of some sort of accident and change in perception of the United States from being a safe place to invest to being a crazy place. Mm-hmm. That's too much danger there.
What would be the effect on the private sector, both big corporations and small businesses? So let's kind of look at those separately in the event of a government shutdown.
Well, it's damaging and it's disruptive. Depends, of course, on exactly the nature of the shutdown, and there's various ways to handle that. But what business really needs at this point is greater certainty. They need to know where government spending is going to be. Need to know what kind of contracts are going to be fulfilled and what sort of conditions. The instability generated by these fiscal confrontations is not helpful to the recovery.
Mm-hmm. The economy, of course, represents a balance of many factors. Is employment the most important one at this point?
Employment is crucial, because employment is the basis not just for people's incomes and their livelihoods and their families, which of course is critical, but also the revenue base of the government. So when people show you a lot of times exaggerated numbers about fiscal deficits, those are exaggerated precisely because the employment is still below where it needs to be and where it will be. The economy will recover. The question is, how quickly can we get back there, and how much uncertainty will be generated by these fiscal confrontations in Washington?
The Simpson-Bowles Commission, we haven't been hearing a whole lot about it. Of course, the president came out initially and said, hey, this is a great idea, and seemingly kind of backed off of that. These seem like, and I think we have to understand that whatever happens here, everybody's going to have to give up a little, and everybody's going to get hurt a little bit by this, but it doesn't have to be as bad as sequestration, of course. So what about Simpson-Bowles and the work of that commission? Does some of that come back into play now, and maybe some of those cuts and some of those things, and then in turn, does that eventually create jobs?
Well, some of those cuts probably will come back into play. I think relative to those proposals, I would strongly recommend strengthening the revenue base of the federal government, not so much cutting some of the programs that are actually quite effective and a good use of public money. But we'll see exactly what proposals the administration puts forward and how the Republicans counter. I think that there is a danger, whatever happens, of some pretty damaging cutbacks in public sector investment, for example. But that does seem to be the mood in Washington at the moment.
And you hear all sorts of things that could come from sequestration, where even NOAA would be shutting down satellites and not on sunny days and not watching or hoping that there aren't any storms that crop up, and the FBI would be furloughed and things like that. I mean, this is it's almost they're playing with this like it's some sort of game on Capitol Hill.
Well, I think that there are some people who are trying to create the impression that we're a banana republic. It doesn't know how to manage its public affairs, and I hope they're wrong. I hope that's not how people look back on this. I hope that we come through it, but it is worrying. The degree of irresponsibility, the degree to which some parts of the political spectrum want to undermine the credibility of federal government, that is alarming.
We're speaking with Simon Johnson, former chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, is the Ronald A. Kurtz Professor of Entrepreneurship at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and co-author of White House Burning: The Founding Fathers, Our National Debt, and Why It Matters to You. What role, rather, would true health care reform play in strengthening the economy, and is the Affordable Health Care Act, in fact, true health care reform?
Well, the Affordable Health Care Act is a step in the right direction, but it's only turns out to be a relatively small step. The longer-term fiscal issues that we face are largely about health care, not about Medicare or Medicaid per se, but much more broadly about health care spending and the rise in that spending relative to GDP. That's what we need to get a grip on, limit the size of that health care spending relative to the size of the economy. Shifting those costs out of the public sector, off Medicare, onto families, individuals, and companies, that's not any kind of solution. And we have to get beyond those proposals. I don't think healthcare is going to be solved and sorted out in the next decade or two, but I do think eventually we will get there.
So do you use the Affordable Health Care Act as then just your starting point to get that true health care reform?
Well, the Affordable Health Care Act is obviously going to be implemented, is being implemented, and yes, we will learn things from that, hopefully about better and worse ways to arrange health care, for example, at the state level. I think ultimately we move more towards a single-payer system with universal coverage, but obviously that statement is incredibly controversial right now, and nobody really wants to put that front and center of their electoral campaigns. So we're waiting to see, we're seeing what we can learn about controlling costs in healthcare, and this issue is not going to go away.
Okay. Simon Johnson, former chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, Ronald A. Kurtz, professor of entrepreneurship at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and co-author of White House Burning: The Founding Fathers, Our National Debt, and Why It Matters to You. Simon, thanks so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks very much.
And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas.
We are coming to you live from our nation's capital, brought to you today by the Communication Workers of America, the good men and women of the Communication Workers Union under President Larry Cohen, the union for the information age. You bet, and find out more about their good work at cwa-union.org. President Obama making a big case of it in his inaugural address, immigration reform. Since then, we have seen a bipartisan group of senators, Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, and Republicans and Democrats in the House as well, come up with their ideas for immigration reform. It looks like the planets may finally be in line to do something about comprehensive immigration reform. Is that the case? Here's a man who's been out there in front on this issue for many years, Henry Cuellar, Congressman from the good state of Texas. Hey, Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you, and good morning to you, Bill. Thank you so much.
All right, Victoria Jones is here also from Talk Radio News this morning. So, Congressman, are you optimistic that we're going to see comprehensive immigration reform this year? And what do you think are the necessary ingredients?
Yes, I do. Bottom line is this. Democrats want immigration reform. Republicans need immigration reform. So I think it's starting to happen. It's got to have three parts. First, border security, smart border security. Two, you got to have a guest worker program that works. And three, you got to have a pathway to citizenship. Otherwise, you're going to have second-rate citizens in the shadows.
On board, I love the way you put it. Democrats want it, Republicans need it.
So true.
It's so true. So whichever way they're coming, it looks like both parties getting together on it. Border security, Congressman, is what seems to me gets lost in here is that we've done a better job at border security, haven't we, in the last few years?
Oh, without a doubt. If you look at the number of Border Patrol, we have the largest amount of Border Patrol in history. In the southwest border, we have about 18,500. If you look at the crossings, we're at a 40-year low of crossing. If you look at the Pew report, you will see that there's actually more Mexicans going back than actually coming over here. And a couple of years ago, the Democrats, we added $600 million of border security, the largest amount infusion of border security in our history. So we've done a lot. And I live on the border. I'm actually just a few miles away from the U.S.-Mexico border right now.
And on the issue of guest workers, there is some concern that these people are coming here and taking jobs away from Americans. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, certainly Americans should get the jobs, number one. Number two, I would tell you, my father was a migrant worker. He worked in the fields, hot sun, working very hard. I represent, San Antonio, Laredo, McAllen, but I represent a lot of rural areas. There's been some of the ranchers, farmers have advertised $14 an hour to go, pick up, some of the produce up there, and they can't get anybody because it's hard work. I know that. My father and my mother did that for many years. So it's the jobs that Americans still want to take. That's what we're looking at doing.
Yeah, I must say, coming from California, I never saw lines of American citizens lined up to pick those strawberries, hunched over all day in those fields around Monterey, California, for example. So I know you're right on about that. So do you think this will happen this year with all of these elements? And what about the again, on the path to citizenship, it's not automatic, is it, that we're talking about?
No, well, we got to look at the final, piece of legislation. What's happening is that, at least people are talking that they want to do it. Nobody's saying that they want to block it. At the end of the day, you're going to have some Democrats who are going to vote no, and you're going to have some Republicans who are going to vote yes. It's going to be a bipartisan way to get it done. But I feel very good about it that, there's movement. I mean, just recently, even the far right came out, that came out and in support of this. So I think there's groups that are coming out, the U.S. Chamber and other folks, that will give some of the Republicans, quote, cover so they can support it.
My question, Congressman, is that I got the strong impression in the House hearing earlier this week that Republicans were looking for something short of citizenship.
Yeah.
That they were looking for green cards or permanent status for undocumented immigrants, but they just weren't willing to go there. Do you think that's as far as they're willing to go? And if that's the case, do you think they would be willing to bend if they were to come in for sufficient pressure from the Chamber of Commerce and other groups?
Well, and you're absolutely right about that, Victoria. What's happening is the Republicans, at least some of the ones I've talked to, some have now moved from nothing at all to just doing the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act is only part of it. Some of them are saying, well, why don't we not make them citizens, and we'll just go ahead and just give them some sort of documentation and do that. I think one of the proposals came out and said, well, we're not going to have the pathways till some commission decides that the border is secure. I mean, I can name you two governors without giving their names that would say that the border is never secure. So, it's moving the goalpost further and further away. I mean, I think we need to, just look at the three parts: border security, guest worker plan that works efficient, that's fair to workers here. And the third thing is you got to set some sort of concrete way to reach the citizenship. Otherwise, we will be back to square one and fight about this. The last time we had this was in 1986, and I was told by Republican friends, hey, listen, we need to have a pathway, not amnesty the way President Reagan did in 1986, but a pathway where they can earn it. Look, my father was born in Guerrero, Tamaulipas. He became a legal resident. He then became a naturalized citizen. He followed the process. I understand all that. But you can't make it so difficult that they give up and say, "Oh, I'm not going to come over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross the desert or the river in Texas and just do it this way and pay some coyote some money and risk my life because the system doesn't work." It's got to be efficient. It's got to be fair. It's got to be something that works for everybody.
I want to come back to where you started, Congressman. Republicans need this. It seems to me that there's some belief on the part of Republicans that all they need to do is vote for immigration reform, and Latinos are just going to flock to the Republican Party and elect Republicans all over the place because this is going to prove that they are in support of the Latino community. Is it going to be that easy?
No way. If you look at it, let's go back to the election day, this last November election day. If you recall, right before that, Republicans were talking about self-deportation. They were talking about amnesty. They were talking about all these things. And then the election hits them. Obama wins 71%. Democrats pretty much win 68% of the votes, in other races. It was a strong showing that, and especially with the fast-growing Hispanic population that we've had, they're saying, oh, we got to do something because we have a problem. So, less than a week later, some of them were saying, well, we need to have immigration reform. We need to do this. Now, you don't change an ideology or a philosophy from one day to another day after the election. Basically what happened, cold reality just hit them in the face. And they said, oh, we got a problem here. And they do have a problem. But it's not going to say one vote is going to change how Hispanics feel about Republicans. No way.
Can we talk about Senator Marco Rubio, the Republican senator, and his impact politically on the immigration debate? He's going to be giving the Republican response to the President's State of the Union address, and he is going to talk about immigration and its role in the American dream and things like that. Do you think that he can have an impact politically in this regard?
Well, he certainly can have a conversation and help us convince some other Republicans, if he continues taking that position, that we need to have immigration reform, because a lot of Republicans will see him as the Republican that can talk about immigration. So how far he goes on immigration reform will certainly carry a lot of weight with other Republicans. I know that because I've talked to some House members, and And we were talking about immigration reform last year, and he was talking about, Senator Rubio was talking about, I think he was talking about the DREAM Act, and the president was talking about the DREAM Act. You know, the Republicans, the House Republicans that we're talking about, they were not saying, okay, this is what we ought to listen to what President Obama said. They were saying, okay, let's see what what the senators talking about. They don't want to listen to Obama. And it was very, very, very interesting what they were saying, because Obama, I would say Rubio will set the goalpost as to how far they can go.
Right. Congressman, I know we got to go, and I want to let you go, but as a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I just have to ask about this before we leave, that yesterday we learned that we're actually making progress in getting the budget deficit to shrink below $1 trillion, which you have saluted as good news.
Well, a lot of people forget what President Bill Clinton did. If we would have just continued what he did back when he left office, we would have been, we had a surplus. We wouldn't be even in this situation. But bottom line is, the deficit is, I believe, it's the lowest in some time in 2008. We ought to be celebrating that we're actually moving the target down. It's moving down instead of going up. But nobody's picked up, and I'm glad you picked that up. So, Bill and Victoria, thank you for telling the listeners that it's President Obama and all of us working together, we're actually bringing down the deficit.
Yeah, the deficit's going down, and the market, the Dow, is going up. So there is some good economic news there that you never hear about except here on the Full Court Press. Congressman Henry Cuellar, great to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill and Victoria. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We'll be back and continue our conversation with Victoria Jones and you on the Full Court Press.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Catherine Poe, Simon Johnson, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the show and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to America's Democrats.